They are the most vast and vital bodies of fresh water on Earth. The North American Great Lakes, Ontario, Erie, Michigan, Huron, Superior. Their shorelines a mystical meeting place of rocks and trees and water. But beyond the peaceful lakeside lies an alien world of chilling depths and sudden violent storms. A world where even the mightiest of vessels can be devoured by the fury of the waves. Ships have been lost in the Great Lakes in the 4 centuries since Europeans first came to trade along their shores. This is the haunting tale of the largest victim of them all, a ship built of steel to carry steel, yet not strong enough to endure the fierce November gales of Lake Superior, a waterway that became a graveyard for 29 men. Waters that never surrender their dead.
The legend lives on from the Chippewa on down of the big lake they call Gitchagumi. The lake, it is said, never gives up her dead when the skies of November turn gloomy. With a load of iron ore, 26,000 tons more than the Edmund Fitzgerald weighed empty. That good ship and true was a bone to be chewed when the gales of November came early. The ship was the pride of the American side, coming back from some mill in Wisconsin. As the big freighters go, it was bigger than most, with a crew and good captain well seasoned, concluding some terms with a couple of steel firms when they left fully loaded for Cleveland. Then later that night when the ship's bell rang, could it be the north wind they'd been feeling?
In June 1995, a small fleet gathers 20 miles offshore from Whitefish Point on Michigan's Upper Peninsula. It is a mission of investigation, resurrection, and completion. The raising of the bell from one of the most mysterious and devastating wrecks in the history of the Great Lakes, the Edmund Fitzgerald. The Canadian naval ship Cormorant carries 2 mini-submarines, and the Anglian Lady brings an array of sophisticated electronic gear to control the Newt suit, a high-tech innovation that allows a diver to work for hours, hundreds of feet below the surface. The expedition is led by Emery Christoph, eminent underwater photographer, Dr. Joseph McInnes, and Tom Farnquist of the Great Lakes Shipwreck Historical Museum.
Well, the Fitzgerald really has a certain kind of mystique, I suppose, and the fact that there was no witnesses and no survivors at all to tell why the ship went down. It was the most thoroughly investigated shipwreck in the history of any disasters on the Great Lakes. The Coast Guard had a very, very extensive investigation. They couldn't even draw any real concrete conclusions. There's been 3 or 4 theories put forward, but nobody seems to agree. Well, we were asked by the family members who lost their loved ones aboard the Fitzgerald if we wouldn't help them out a bit. One thing is they wanted to establish a memorial at Whitefish Point to remember the family members. And one thing led to another, and the bell was suggested as a likely piece of hardware that would really have some connection to the Fitzgerald itself.
The divers will try to remove the old bell and make it the centerpiece of a memorial to the men who died. Then they will replace it on the wreck with a new bell, engraved with the names of the lost crew of the ship they called Big Fitz. Dr. Joseph McInnes, an internationally recognized expert in diving medicine and deep water diving.
For 20 years, the families have never had a formal kind of closure of this tragic accident where they lost their sons and their husbands, and today gives them that. There are many of them out here today. They've spoken and they've said this really allows us to put this whole thing at rest, as one of them said to me.
My brother, who died on the Fitzgerald, was the oldest. He was about a year and a half older than I. And when my father died when we were very young, he took over the family. He was 13 years old, but he was the man of the family. He told me the night before I left to go to Vietnam that if anything happened to me over there, he would come and get me. And I've tried now for all these years to bring him home, to come and get him. And this is as close as I can get. I can't do it anymore. And I know I won't be able to bring him home. But I've tried, and this is the best I can do.
The story begins on an autumn morning of almost surreal warmth and calm as the freighter Edmund Fitzgerald sails toward the port of Superior, Wisconsin, to take on a load of iron ore for the auto factories of the East. It is November 9th, 1975, the beginning of Fitzgerald's 40th voyage in her 17th year of service.
The Mystery of the Edmund Fitzgerald on Discovery Sunday.
She had been built in the late 1950s, a time of optimism on the Great Lakes. The new St. Lawrence Seaway is ushering in an era of booming commerce, and the Edmund Fitzgerald, named for the chairman of the insurance company that owns her, will be the pride of the Seaway fleet. But as she is christened by Mrs. Edmund Fitzgerald, and 10,000 spectators look on, the ship slides into the harbor at a perilous angle. The huge vessel, 729 feet long and 75 feet wide, sends a huge wave crashing over the pier. Then she smashes into the dock with terrifying force. One man is so shaken by the sight, he suffers a heart attack and dies. And others swear that the Edmund Fitzgerald is trying to climb right out of the water. But for 17 years, the Fitzgerald is one of the champions of the waters. She sets records for the heaviest load ever carried on the Great Lakes, and for the fastest run by a ship her size. Below decks, she has staterooms for the use of important corporate clients. And although by 1975 she is not the longest of the lake freighters, she remains a proud flagship under the command of one of the most experienced captains on the Seaway, Ernest McSorley. On this calm November morning, Indian summer embraces the giant ship as she pulls into port at the western end of the lake the native Indians call Gitchiguni, the Big Sea Water. Riding high and empty, she berths at Burlington Northern Dock Number 1, ready to take on 50,000 gallons of fuel and more than 50 million pounds of iron ore pellets. First Mate Jack McCarthy supervises the loading of the cargo. He monitors 3 lights that warn if the ship is riding unevenly in the water. Green for a list to starboard. Red for a tilt to port. White means the Edmund Fitzgerald is level. McCarthy is a robust Irishman, adored by the crewmen he supervises.
I know through the years that Dad was very well thought of by crews. He was fair to them. And given 25 to 30 men working together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 9, 10, 12 months a year, it couldn't all be serious and by the book. And I think that with his experience, he knew how to take those liberties without jeopardizing any of the integrity of the crew or the operation of the boat. Captain McSorley and Dad made a pact to sail out their last years together. That means a lot. Fitz was the biggest boat in the fleet. McSorley was the senior captain, and it was his pick of whom he wanted to be next to him in command.
It takes only 6 hours to fully load Fitzgerald, and half an hour to seal each hatch with a 7-ton sheet of steel rimmed with 68 clamps. Each clamp must be tightened manually, each hold sealed watertight, because flooded compartments could drag the ship down to the bottom of the lake. It's a little past 2 in the afternoon when Captain McSorley slides the Edmund Fitzgerald away from the loading dock to begin her eastbound run. McSorley has spent 44 seasons on the water, working his way up from deckhand to ship's master. But he is 62, and the long days and nights at the helm have wearied him. His wife, Nellie, crippled by arthritis and a recent stroke, has been admitted to a nursing home. On a late October stopover, he promises his wife he will hurry home as soon as the shipping season ends. It won't be long, McSorley vows. It is their last meeting. Seamen like 22-year-old Bruce Hudson make up Fitzgerald's roster.
Bruce was a fun-loving boy and always loved adventure and having fun, and he loved people and was very friendly and was just a very outgoing person. He was very fond of the Fitzgerald when he went on it. He called her the Big Fitz. He was on board with a group of young men. There was about 6 of them around the same age. He spoke a lot about Mark Thomas and Carl Pickle and David Weiss and Tom Benson and a lot of them that he was friends with. Bruce thought John McCarthy was very nice, and they were close, and he liked John McCarthy a lot. And I know Mr. McCarthy did. I know that he looked after him when he could.
It requires only 29 men to smoothly run a ship that is more than 1/8 of a mile long. Wheelsmen like Gene O'Brien and Johnny Poviak. Down in the engine room, Chief Engineer George Hall a serious, enigmatic man, Hall is a close friend of Ernest McSorley, and like the captain, the ship is his life. Under Hall's command, newcomer Tom Benson, a 23-year-old in his first season aboard the Fitzgerald. Bob Rafferty, taken aboard at the last moment because the regular cook is laid up with ulcers. For the crew, the Edmund Fitzgerald is both workplace and home. There is a sameness to the daily routine, but the work is well-paying, the bond among crewmates strong. A year of lake service brings 10 months of a comfortable room and hearty meals aboard ship, and a 2-month winter vacation, a life without traffic jams or shopping malls, ruled by the rhythm of the seasons. On this day, distant and as yet unseen, 2 volatile air masses are on a collision course that will churn Lake Superior into an evil frenzy and put everyone on the big lake freighters into a desperate battle to survive. At 4:30 in the afternoon, another giant ore carrier, the Arthur Anderson, 767 feet long, departs her home port under the command of Captain Bernie Cooper. Cooper has more than 30 years of experience sailing the Great Lakes. His first mate, Morgan Clark, is another Great Lakes veteran. Like Ernest McSorley, Bernie Cooper is also trying to squeeze in one last run before winter shuts down the Seaway. The 2 huge freighters are heading for the Seaway locks at Sault Ste. Marie at the opposite end of Lake Superior, a 2-day sail to the east. For 300 miles, they will play follow the leader, with the heavier, slower Anderson lagging 10 to 20 miles behind. The unpredictable November weather will worsen with astonishing swiftness. By the next afternoon, Lake Superior will rise in all her fury. By the next evening, only one of the 2 giant ships will still be afloat.
The wind in the wires made a tattletale sound when the wave broke over the railing. And every man knew, as the captain did too, 'twas the witch of November come stealing.
Turn to Shipwreck, the mystery of the Edmund Fitzgerald on Discovery Sunday.
As they churn eastward across Lake Superior, the fates of 2 giant merchant ships are inexorably linked. Aboard the Arthur Anderson, Captain Bernie Cooper plots his own weather charts, and he radios to the bridge of the Edmund Fitzgerald that the weather is getting worse, much worse. At about 9 p.m., the ships are proceeding eastward under worsening conditions when they receive the report of a gale warning. It forecasts winds of 40 to 50 miles per hour and seas running at 10 feet.
Whenever you start to get gale warnings, the word goes around the ship. You know, we call all the galley, we call the engineers, and you send your forward end crew on to dog everything down, to make sure everything is tight. You check your clamps on your deck.
Captain Cooper and Fitzgerald master Ernest McSorley, with more than 80 years of sailing experience between them, decide to change course. They leave the traditional shipping lanes at the south end of the lake and head north. By hugging the Canadian shoreline, they hope to gain shelter from the northeast gale. On the greatest of the Great Lakes, the seas are running at 10 feet and building fast. night, the weather steadily worsens. At 1 a.m., visibility is reduced to 2 miles in heavy rain. Winds gust to 60 miles per hour. By daybreak, the calm of the previous morning has become a distant dream. Giant waves wash over the cargo deck. But there's no panic. These men have been through many storms before. It is business as usual. As Captain Bernie Cooper tries to calculate the probable course of the storm, high above the ship, a swirling mass of clouds is building, packing winds of hurricane force with gusts of nearly 100 miles per hour. And the worst of the weather is blowing right toward the two ships.
Last plot I made, it showed that there was 80 knot winds going to be in the west-northwest or northwest. And I don't think I really believed it myself, but they had 92-mile-an-hour winds at the Sioux, I guess. So, yeah, we plotted it, and, you know, like all sailors, I figure, well, if I get the sea over my stern, I've got it made.
Just after noon on November 10th, Cooper and McSorley plot their next move. They will turn south. To reach Sault Ste. Marie, they'll have to pass close to the treacherous 6-fathom shoal just north of Caribou Island. 36 feet of churning water, hiding jagged rocks that can tear a ship to shreds. At 2:45, the Edmund Fitzgerald is 10 miles ahead of the Anderson, steering southeast in 16-foot waves. A vicious crosswind lashes the ships. Now it begins to snow. In the whiteout, Cooper can only locate the Fitzgerald's position by radar. Cooper's radar shows the Fitzgerald and her 26,000 tons of cargo perilously close to 6-fathom shoal. With only 9 feet of clearance, even in calm conditions, she's much too close. A few minutes later, aboard the Edmund Fitzgerald, Captain McSorley makes his first report of trouble.
Well, he called me up, that was 3:10 in the afternoon. And he said, I've got a little problem. He said, my fence rail is down. He said, I've got 2 vents missing, and I've taken a starboard list. Now, that immediate list, again, tells me that he either had a stress fracture or he bottomed out. He said he had his pumps on. I asked him if he had his pumps on. He said yes. And later on, he said that he wasn't gaining anything by pumping out on it, so the water was coming in the hull as fast as they were pumping it out.
Concerned about the water flooding his cargo holds, McSorley slows the Fitzgerald and asks the Anderson to catch up to him as he fights his way toward a safe harbor, a harbor he will never reach.
We will return to Shipwreck, the mystery of the Edmund Fitzgerald on Discovery Sunday.
Find out why getting the latest weather forecast used to be a matter of life or death on Discover Magazine. Tonight at 12 Eastern, 11 Central on the Discovery Channel. Explore your world.
Experienced investors protect themselves with hard cash, a money market fund. But not all money funds are alike. So call Kemper for 5 things you should know before you invest. Learn why an advertised yield could be misleading, why some funds don't fit you, why a hot fund may be risky, and why you should look for a history of triumphant returns. Markets are changing. There are things you should know. Free from Kemper Money Funds.
There's a feeling that's beyond clean. We call it crystal clean. And your teeth can experience it with the toothpaste that helps prevent tartar buildup. Colgate Tartar Control. Thousands of micro-cleaning crystals make their way into those tiny spaces between teeth. Crystals you can actually feel. And when you rinse, your teeth feel more than brushed. They feel crystal clean. Colgate Tartar Control. Feel the crystal clean of Colgate.
What's on TV tonight? Who cares? Wow, a new online service from CompuServe. Try it free. Now get a special TV offer on WOW, a new online service from CompuServe, exclusively for Windows 95. Coupon optional.
Beginning Monday on Wild Discovery, a southern side of Mother Nature you won't believe. Get extreme. Find out what it takes to survive below the equator on Wild Discovery, beginning Monday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on the Discovery Channel.
We now return to Shipwreck, the mystery of the Edmund Fitzgerald on Discovery Sunday.
It's 4 p.m. Aboard the cargo ship Arthur Anderson, Captain Bernie Cooper is recording 100-mile-an-hour wind gusts under a savage, darkening sky. And just ahead of him, invisible in the raging storm, the Edmund Fitzgerald and the 29 men who sail in her are engaged in a life-or-death struggle with the fury of Lake Superior. 10 minutes later, Captain Ernest McSorley reports that his radar masts have been disabled by the wind. At 4:30, the lighthouse and radio beacon at Whitefish Point go dark and silent when their power lines are blown down. Without radar or shore lights to guide him, and with only a radio phone for communication with other ships, the Edmund Fitzgerald is sailing blind through the tempest with 30-foot waves coming over her decks. At 5 o'clock, McSorley asks First Mate Morgan Clark aboard the Anderson to check his position. Scanning his radar screen, Clark reports that the Edmund Fitzgerald is 3.5 miles from Whitefish Point. For McSorley, this is good news. He had hoped to keep at least 2 miles of open water between his ship and the shoreline he cannot see. 5:30 p.m. Captain McSorley, increasingly desperate to contact any nearby vessel, radios to a Swedish ship in Whitefish Bay that he is taking heavy seas over his cargo deck. He has been on the Great Lakes for 44 years, but this is the worst he has ever seen. 6:40, just clear of Caribou Island, the Anderson is rocked by 2 gigantic waves in rapid succession. 35-foot towers of water crash down on the ship. The Anderson survives, but waves as powerful as those found in a mid-ocean cyclone are bearing down on the Edmund Fitzgerald from behind. In a few minutes, they will catch up to her.
Those 2 seas were the biggest that we ever had going down there. And they happened about 6:30 in the evening. And I just wonder if those 2 seas didn't catch up with the Fitzgerald. And I just got to thinking about it afterwards. If those seas were that big, they rolled up his deck, and he's got a list. And the water stays up in the forward cabin, it's going to put his bow down under the water.
At 7:10 p.m., Ernest McSorley gets a final position fix from the Anderson. Morgan Clark asks how the Edmund Fitzgerald is faring. McSorley replies, "We are holding our own." These are the last words from the Edmund Fitzgerald. At 7:30, the snow eases. Bernie Cooper searches the horizon for the lights of the Fitzgerald. But there are no lights, and the radar screen aboard the Anderson shows nothing. The Big Fitz has disappeared. Again and again, Morgan Clark tries to raise McSorley by radio. In reply, there is only silence. Bernie Cooper calls the Coast Guard. I am very concerned. He was right in front of us. I can see no lights. I just hope he didn't take a nosedive. As the Anderson reaches the safety of Whitefish Bay, the U.S. Coast Guard initiates a search for the Edmund Fitzgerald. But every rescue ship at its disposal is either broken down, too small, or too far away to be of use. An hour later, an air search is begun by the American and Canadian Coast Guards, but they find no one to rescue. The Coast Guard asks Bernie Cooper to take his ship back into the storm to join the search.
Captain Milrad, he asked me if I'd personally go back out, and I was reluctant to go. Really, I was. But he said there's a ship on the bottom, and I felt like saying there could be two if I go back, you know, but I finally decided I'd go out. When we went down and turned around, I went out to Whitefish Point at the same distance we were off when we came down. And then I headed the ship west-northwest directly into the wind from our last position that we had over the Fitzgerald.
Seven other ships safely anchored in Whitefish Bay also are asked to help. Only one, the William Clay Ford, agrees to join the Anderson.
The first time I talked to the Coast Guard, I said, no, I wouldn't go out there. And that's why I went to anchor in the first place, to stay out of the storm. After I told the Coast Guard, no, I wouldn't go out there, I went down my room and thought about it for a while, and I decided, well, somebody's got to go out there, so I called the Coast Guard and told them we'd pick up the anchor and go.
As the two ships battle back through the gale, a helicopter sweeps the waves with searchlights. Nothing is seen. All night, the Ford and the Anderson crisscross the area.
Probably 11 o'clock in the morning, the third mate was still up in the bridge. And, you know, these fellows have spent all their time up there. And he spotted the lifeboat. There was only a half a lifeboat. It looked like a giant hand had just torn it right in two.
We searched for 3 days in probably the roughest seas I've ever been in my life, including the North Atlantic and hurricanes in the Gulf, because you got 3 different seas from 3 different directions. At one point, we rolled 51 degrees. It was a real quick snap roll, and my XO went flying across the bridge and was actually standing on the bulkhead, on the port bulkhead. If the door had been open to the port bridge wing, he'd have went right on over the side. It was really bad.
An air and sea search is continuing for possible survivors of the Edmund Fitzgerald, a 729-foot ore carrier, which apparently broke apart and sunk last night on Lake Superior. The ship and its 29-man crew vanished in a storm with 80-mile-an-hour winds and wave heights up to 25 feet. All that has been found is an oil slick and some debris.
The news goes out. The pride of the Great Lakes Fleet has vanished with all hands.
You assume the ship has gone down. Is there now any hope for survivors at all?
Well, it would seem very dim at this point, with almost 24 hours that they've been in the water. 50-degree water, you don't normally survive much longer than 3 to 4 hours.
29 families anxiously follow the search. For watchman Ray Cundy's wife, Doreen, it is a terrible ordeal.
When I came home after bingo, and I automatically put the TV on. And I just happened to glance over the TV, and across the TV was this here. Edmund Fitzgerald, feared, sunk, Lake Superior. A friend of mine from downtown called, and she says, Doreen, guess what? The Fitzgerald has sunk, and all the men in it are dead. I said, that's a poor, cruel joke. And I called her a bad name, and I hung up. Then I looked at the TV again. Damn it, I seen it again. Then I knew that there was something to this.
For 2 days, bits of debris are found. An inflatable raft, life preservers, but no bodies and no survivors. On November 14th, 4 days after the Edmund Fitzgerald disappears, a U.S. Navy aircraft carrying magnetic detection equipment senses a large object on the bottom of Lake Superior. Later, a Navy ship confirms the find with sonar. Next, a remote-controlled submersible locates the haunting wreck, broken in two, leaving a legacy of grief and a lingering mystery. How could such a mighty vessel have gone down so suddenly, taking 29 men to their graves?
Does anyone know where the love of God goes when the waves turn the minutes to hours? The searchers all say they'd have made Whitefish Bay if they'd put 15 more miles behind her. They might have split up or they might have capsized. They may have broke deep and took water. And all that remains is the faces and the names of the wives and the sons and the daughters.
The Mystery of the Edmund Fitzgerald on Discovery Sunday.
The word is one of the most chilling in our language. Shipwreck, a vessel built to rule the seas, consumed by the seas. For centuries, human ingenuity and enterprise have struggled to build stronger ships, safer ships. But still, sometimes, the sea prevails. One moment, the Edmund Fitzgerald was the pride of the Great Lakes fleet. The next, she was gone. One fact seems clear. Before she went down, she must have taken on thousands of gallons of water. But how did that water get into her holds and below her decks?
In my mind, I'm convinced that she took water on from topside. Whether it physically lost the hatch, I don't know. But I know that with the hatch gaskets loose, hatch clamps loose, and we found all kinds of them loose. It's a hard job. The clamps are a very good clamp, but if they're going to do their job right, it's a lot of work to snap them into place. People keep asking me, well, what caused the loss of the Fitzgerald? And my answer is complacency.
Any suggestion of negligence on the part of the Fitzgerald's crew is controversial. Few freighter captains support the Coast Guard's findings. One who opposes was piloting a Swedish freighter through the treacherous Superior channels the night the Edmund Fitzgerald went down. Cedric Woodard was one of the last to talk to Ernest McSorley.
Nobody will ever know what happened, but I would swear 100% it wasn't hatch covers. Because I've been in starboard hatch covers and go down the hole and watch them with the same hatch covers. And I went down and watched seawood water. Maybe a cupful would come through or something. And if her hatches were much worse, if her hatch didn't have no clamps on, that much water wouldn't have come in, because them hatches weighs tons. And they sit there and they can't get off. So how could that much water come through?
The first unmanned underwater survey in 1976 shows the Fitzgerald broken into two sections, lying at an angle to each other, with a mass of iron ore pellets and twisted wreckage on the lake bed between them. 2 years later, a 50-page report concludes that ineffective closure of the cargo hatches allowed water to penetrate the hold and weigh the ship down. But not everyone is convinced. Some believe the Fitzgerald suffered a fate similar to the ore carrier Daniel J. Morrell, which broke in half on another wild November night 9 years earlier. Bernie Cooper believes an uncharted shoal marked the beginning of the end of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
I don't care what anybody says. At 3:10 in the afternoon, she had either bottomed out or had a stress fracture of the hull. That's the only two possibilities I have. She was sinking from that time on. My opinion is she bottomed out.
No one will ever know if the Fitzgerald scraped bottom or where. But the charts of Lake Superior used by Captain McSorley show 6 Fathom Shoal 1 mile east of its actual position. With his radar masts rendered useless by the winds, McSorley was sailing blind with an inaccurate chart of the most dangerous part of his course. The gales of November dealt Ernest McSorley a cruel hand.
With the weight of the water coming aboard the shutter, and if he bottomed out, it wouldn't have to be a tremendous blow to cause the damage, especially if it was a rocky shoal. And in bottoming out, you wouldn't feel it because you're always getting that kind of shuddering motion, and he could have just scraped the bottom enough to rupture a couple of tanks.
On Superior, in one of the worst storms of recorded history, Ernest McSorley had only one choice: to sail for Whitefish Bay and safe harbor. He tried to run for it, but ran out of time.
He sounded tired on the telephone, but I'm sure that he wasn't about to. You just can't panic the crew. You got to keep your mouth shut. You got to work around that somehow. And I like every other captain, I think you think your ship was infallible. I think he thought that ship was going to get him down. I know I thought that way about the Anderson. I didn't think anything. I thought she was indestructible.
The great mystery remains the suddenness of the Fitzgerald's disappearance. For hours, she was in frequent radio contact with the Anderson and other ships. McSorley's radio phone was always at arm's length. Yet she went down without a single cry of mayday. Captain Bernie Cooper believed she was swallowed by a single monstrous wave.
I think it was sudden and catastrophic. The ship just disappeared completely. I mean, if those seas were that big, they rolled up his deck, and he's got a list. And the water stays up in the forward cabin. It's going to put his bow down under the water. And once she started down, the screw just drove her into the bottom.
We will return to Shipwreck, the mystery of the Edmund Fitzgerald on Discovery Sunday.
In the summer of 1995, a final mission descends into Superior's black depths. The mission? To recover the ship's bell, to once again hear the voice of the Edmund Fitzgerald. The bell will be taken to the Great Lakes Shipwreck Historical Museum at Whitefish Point. In its place, a new brass bell, inscribed with the names of the 29 men who died, will become an eternal memorial, returned forever to the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Our spiritual history tells us that the chaos of all the elements was used to form a harmony that created this beautiful and awesome world of ours. And the greatest wonder of that creation was the dignity of human life. It was the same chaos of the elements 20 years ago that took the Edmund Fitzgerald and ended the journey of life for 29 men. We remember that the chaos of that night is below us right now, but it's one of quietness and one of solitude.
It's It's somewhat fitting we're gathered here today in the weather that is keeping us cold and chilly.
It is with great pride and a great deal of humility that I present this bell on behalf of the people of Ontario to the people of Michigan, and especially to the families of the Edmund Fitzgerald crew.
The men deserve the memorial, and they should have had it a long time ago, but they finally got it. Being out there on that spot gave me peace of mind because the sun was shining, the sky was clear, the water was beautiful, and it filled that void for me.
And I've got to say, due to the long list of contributors and supporters, all we can just say is, thank you very much.
As we remember the men, as we hear the bell toll, we should grieve. But we should also not forget to celebrate their lives as well. As the bell is in their hearts, so they are in the bell. And in the bell's tone are the voices of the men, and we should listen. Ernest M. McSorley, Master. First Mate, John H. McCarthy. Oiler, Thomas Benson. Deckhand, Bruce L. Hudson. Second Assistant Engineer, Russell G. Haskell. Cadet of the Deck, David E. Weiss.
Superior, they said, never gives up the dead when the gales of November come early.
Third Assistant Engineer, Oliver J. Champeau. The 30th ring, and it is for all the mariner sailors who have lost their lives on the Great Lakes.
Tomorrow on SciTrek, take an in-depth look at the greatest meat-eating machines of the prehistoric world. See how their anatomy and hunting techniques allowed them to rule their world. Tomorrow on SciTrek, only on the Discovery Channel. Explore your world.